white to move and draw. So the white king is behind the black pawn, going to promote on g1, whereas black can stop that pawn from promoting on e8. So that is the problem. Yeah, Matt, that is correct. That is the solution. So the timing has to be right, because you want my bishop to stop the pawn here. Yeah, so this is the idea. And then we are going to get to g1 going this way. So king e7. And now king f6 is a threat, so g5, king d6. King e5 is now a threat, so g4. And in this moment, we play e7, because now black does not have bishop h5. It's very important. So we have to go to b5 now. And now white wins a tempo. Bishop has to move. And now we are in the square of the pawn. And black doesn't have time to get to this pawn in time, because we can just promote and liquidate to draw an endgame. Okay, so that was the solution to the first one. It seems like mission impossible, but that's the Reti theme. So here we have another. What about puzzle number 2? White to move and win. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is correct. So you both saw b6 and knight f5. And Matt, you saw all the way to king d2. And that is actually, at that point, it has to be king d2. So, okay, knight f5 check. King has to go back to d7 to keep the pawn at bay. And if king c6, we have this knight fork. So king d7. And the point now is that white has knight e7. So this knight from e7 is basically controlling the bishop because of one more little trick. So here is bishop a2, and then we have king d2. And black is going to run out of moves very soon. If bishop b1, then king c1, bishop a2, king b2. And then the bishop has to go somewhere on this diagonal, which is not safe. So let's see, knight e7. Yeah, that's the idea. So let's first see, how do we win the bishop if it goes to e6? So, so Matt, you already got the idea. Let's give the rest a chance. And it is the same idea if black had put the bishop there, or even there, or even there. So when the bishop is on those 4 squares, we can win it indirectly. Of course, d5 and g8, we win it directly. So compared to the Reti study we saw with king h1, here we have a situation where the knight attacks indirectly and directly. So here the idea is b7, and then knight to c6 threatens promotion. King has to take, and then we have a knight fork. So that knight fork could also be on a5 in case the bishop was here. Very nice idea. So so basically the bishop can only go to a2 and then b1, and this is where we kicked it away by getting our king to b2. So these pawns here in the middle, they do matter. They also matter for the sake of white needs an extra pawn on the board. So black could just sacrifice the bishop to get rid of the b pawn. Okay, so what happens on bishop h7 here? So this is a typical idea, e3, yeah, and then we have this bishop blocked by its own pawn, which it doesn't only happen in studies, but it's definitely something they're aware of when they compose these studies. It can happen in real games too. So black is simply running out of moves here. So he can maybe go back and forth here, but we can just bring our king in. We could even bring our king up here and just to take the bishop. Or we could bring it up here to support our pawn. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so yeah, and the bishop is trapped. And again, if black somehow sacrifices that pawn to get the bishop out, then we have a case of 2 extra pawns is winning. So that's the solution. Okay, let's take the next one. So this study actually started back here. Study number 3. It's the Reti idea, but the actual study started a little bit earlier. But so from this position, it's actually hard. So that's why I skipped the first part. So here's how it goes: king c6. And if black plays f5 now, we are ready to go back and chase that pawn, because the black king has to take care of the h6 pawn. So black brings the bishop out. And now this is very cool from white. Now white simply goes back to d5 and wait for that bishop to enter c3. It's the only way that black can try to improve the position. And now after h7, black has to go f5 and then d7. And then we can sacrifice that pawn. And then we have the puzzle from the puzzle sheet. So how can white draw the game here? So the entire study is actually very nice, because white has to, the beginning of study is not easy at all. And then we come to this point where the Reti idea is displayed. Yeah, so we can try to win a tempo on the bishop and get back. But here the problem is the black king is a little bit closer. So let's see, king c4 attacks the bishop. I go back here. And now my king can simply go to f6 now and defend the pawn. And then black is just winning. So let's say here, then here. So we can get in front of the pawn, but king to f6, then black has a winning endgame. So that doesn't work. So king c4 doesn't work. So Reti, he has all these studies where you make all these counterintuitive moves like king back to h1, you name it. It looks totally impossible. But here the solution is to play king e6 to attack that pawn, force it forward. Okay, and then we go back to d5 because we are going to win a tempo on that bishop, and then we are going to get into the square of the pawn. And we are going to promote the pawn with check, which is an important point. So let's see, f3, king c4. So if black tries to promote, so there is this idea of a check on a1, picking up the queen, but we promote with check. So that's kind of important. So, but this idea of going to e6 and then go back again is quite counterintuitive. So here, after king c4, black bishop has to move, and then we are in the square of the pawn. So, and here we can just give up the pawn and liquidate to a draw. So very surprising, but that's not the only time we see this idea. What about this one? Next puzzle, number 4. So this is the this is the Amelung. Yes, that's the Amelung theme. So king f5. Yeah, and all kinds of like this just doesn't work. So after this, black is just ready to play king f8, get out of the back rank, and then activate the bishop, win the rook. This is just losing. So king f5, and then king h3. And now we have the situation with, so this is basically the pure Amelung without these pawns over here that Trotsky added. And then we have to a knight, and then we fork the 2 minor pieces, and it's a draw. Okay. All right. Let's take the next one. White to move and win. So I'm sure you have the right idea after the presentation, but to make it work is not so easy. So did you solve this one? It's also very tricky. So first we can give a check and then take the pawn, because now the knight is controlling e5, so the bishop cannot get out. Okay. But then the king can just stay around the corner there. So now we cannot gain, we need knight d8 with gain of tempo, that's correct. And the way we get the tempo, talking about winning a tempo with positions with king and knight, which we talked about in the other online class, interesting endgame. So in this case, we do it by sacrificing the pawn. So king f7. It's very nice. King b7, and then we sacrifice the pawn, and then we go back to g7, g6. And now we get knight d8 check, and then knight f7. So that's a very nice idea. And then we have exactly the same as, and here white again has 2 ways to protect d3. King to e4 or knight to e5. So either way, it's winning for white. So that was the other idea with a little twist. Very nice. You're sacrificing the pawn there. Okay, so let's move on to the next puzzle. So the last couple of puzzles, they're a little bit trickier because there is a beginning to the study as well. So here's an example of another composer using the Reti idea. So with different piece configuration, we have knights and rooks. So there are two parts in this study. I'm not sure if you solved it, then you can put in your suggestions. The first part is to get to the point where we can use the Reti idea. So black is a rook up, the knights are hanging. So let me just start off with the position. If knight somehow takes this knight, then black can eliminate this pawn. And then we can take the knight. And let's say something like this. Now black can just take the pawn and then the A pawn will decide. So that doesn't work. We can even use our rook trick just to win a tempo if that's what we want. But either way, it's just winning. So that doesn't work. So we have to try to win the black rook. So this is how we start off with king c8. And after knight takes c5, we can win the rook. But then the problem is, of course, that black can play a5 here. Okay. So this is the second part of the study where we need to use the Reti idea the right way. Let's just go back to the beginning for a while, for a moment there. King c7 is not good because after promotion, black has time to take here with check because the king is on c7. So that's why we have to go to c8. And then this is how the study begins, and we get to this position. So how does it go from here? Now we have to implement the Reti idea. So e7 is obvious, and then black has to stop this pawn on the promotion square. So we'll have to give a check and then move to f6. And how does white move the king around now then? Yep, king is headed for e5. That is correct. So king c7, knight has to go to f6, and then king to d6. Now we're threatening king c5. So black has to move that pawn. And now king e5 attacks the knight. Knight has to go to e8, and then king d4. And we are in time to eliminate that a pawn. We're in the square of the pawn, and king d2 doesn't work. White will simply pick up that pawn. So, so here again, the Reti idea, we have to stay in the middle like this to go both ways. Winning that crucial tempo on the knight on f6. Okay. So let's see the next one. Maybe this was the one you were referring to earlier with that dark squared bishop instead of the light squared bishop. So This is white to move and win. Yeah. So, Matt, this is definitely how it starts. King d3. And then, yep, bishop has to go back to a1, and then knight e5. And there's a reason we don't want to put the bishop here on b2, because the best defense for black is to play f5 here, and then there's a knight fork on c4. So let's see first the point. If f takes, then king e4 blocks the bishop diagonal. And if bishop takes, then we have king e4. And now f5, we can just take the bishop. Then bishop moves, then we block the bishop again. It's a very nice idea. So the best defense is f5. What to do then? Yeah, that is correct. And curiously enough, it turns out that so the bishop is not even safe down in the corner there. So there's knight takes c6. Yeah. And then no matter what black does, then knight d4. The only way to try to stop this is king c5. That's the only square. And now we have this knight fork on b3. And now the black king is not in time to catch that pawn. We're just outside the square, so white is winning. Yep. So a tricky knight. And it's a fun little point that the knight fork that picks up the bishop in the corner there. Okay, let's take the next one. The last one. And here we have the Reti idea again. You have seen this before. Do you remember it? Then you can just, yeah, it's a very nice idea. Yeah, that's correct. After that, there are still a few details. So sometimes when I use this as a sharp study, a sharp endgame, and you have to play it out to a draw, you can still go wrong. There's a couple of few moments later. Yep. So let's see. So the problem is obvious enough. If we promote to a queen, then bishop behind the pawn, and black is simply winning. The bishop cannot be taken, and while black promotes. So it's not possible to promote the pawn. So the solution is to play king c8 to attack that pawn. After b5, we simply go back to d7. And so here we have again the back and forth, like in the Reti study. That is the Reti idea by Reti, when we played king e6 and then back to d5. So what is the idea here? How to catch that pawn down before it runs down the board? So the clue is we want to win a tempo on f5. At some point, black will have to play bishop f5. And then we can win the crucial tempo in the race. So let's see, black plays b4. And what does white play here? We need a little precision here. So is it king d6 or king e6? Yeah. It is not king e6. So I get the idea in this position. This is a draw. But I don't have to play king f4. I can play king e4. Yeah, you saw it. And now there's no way for white to get back to fight the b pawn. So we have to play king d6 here. And then bishop f5. And then we have king e5. Bishop has to move. And then king d4. And we can again liquidate into a drawn position with a draw here. Okay, that was the last puzzle for today. I'm going to send out the database afterwards, and I will see you soon again. Oh, all right, great. See you, bye.